Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Cortright cast, your one-stop shop for everything science fiction, fantasy, movies, Hollywood, pop culture news, and pretty much everything in between. This is our first podcast of the new year. Woo! Party, John. Come on.
Yay.
Did you just say yay? Yay.
Yay.
Yay. I got a comment the other day of someone saying, they said, tell your clone to up the energy.
I saw that.
I was like,
that made me laugh really hard.
Yeah, it was funny, but also it just made me think of it because I was like, come on, Jonathan, party with me. And you're like, yay.
He gave you like a checklist of things to do.
Yeah, well, anyway. Some of the comments sometimes just, they're interesting, but first podcast of the new year, and we have finally been back to the movie theater, and that's what I'm most excited to talk about because December 25th, News of the World came out in theaters along with Wonder Woman 1984. But we've already been there. Last week's podcast, if you want to know my thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984, they are in last week's podcast, episode 14. And I did not make Jonathan suffer through that film. I wanted to. We talked about it, but we couldn't really make the schedules work. So I did the podcast solo, and that meant I suffered alone. So yeah, running into 2021, not a lot of great news across the world. I know everyone's excited for new beginnings. I'm hoping, but starting at least in the Hollywood film realm, between heading into 2021 with all the streaming service news, I guess Wonder Woman 1984 was not the first movie of 2021, but as a way to cap off 2020, it wasn't a great send-off.
Fittingly terrible.
Yeah, you're right. It was fittingly terrible, but it made me wish that we had waited to watch that movie to record our 2020 wrap-up podcast, because it would have been like when I asked what was the worst movie of 2020, that probably would have been the movie. And I really thought that maybe like as I was watching it, I was like, people might like this, right? Like I'm gonna, if I give this a really bad review, that's going to be like a controversial opinion, or people are going to be like, oh, you're crazy, I love it. Because that's what happens when you talk bad about Zack Snyder or Justice League. There's always like a legion of people ready to tell you that you're crazy, or anything these days. We talked about Wonder Woman, I think a couple times on the podcast so far, at least lightly. And I thought Wonder Woman 1 got a lot of praise that it didn't totally deserve. I thought it did deserve some of its praise, but I wasn't like super excited on that movie. It had some good things, but also had a lot of bad. A lot of people seemed to not care about the bad when Wonder Woman 1 came out. So when I was like going into Wonder Woman 2, I was watching, I was like, there's no way anyone's watching this and thinking this is good, right? Please tell me no. Yeah. Please tell me no.
Well,
and
with Wonder Woman 1, I think what was good about that movie, that made me forgive a lot of it, is that what I liked about that movie was what I feel like is missing in a lot of MCU movies. And what was bad about that movie was most of the superhero elements.
The things that the MC movies get, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and this podcast is not about Wonder Woman. We've already tread that path. But yeah, I was very excited to release last week's podcast and have no one tell me that I was wrong. I've had so many people, like from the clips to the podcast, just like, agreed. It was truly awful. Yep. Garbage can. Like, this movie it stunk. And I was like, oh, okay, thank God. I go on YouTube, the entirety of YouTube reviewers, the plethora of film critics on YouTube are all just roasting it over the fire. And I was like, okay, I don't have a controversial opinion like all of my Star Wars opinions, apparently. But anyway, News of the World, Tom Hanks's new film, which came out December 25th. We finally got to go and see it in theaters, which we did last weekend. And, it was really nice to get back to the theaters right off the bat. That's an obvious take. It was so nice to be able to watch a film on the big screen, nice and loud. I really enjoy Tom Hanks, seeing him on screen. And to also see a film that wasn't like a big franchise film. It was nice to just go watch a film that was made by someone, I don't know if that was an indie film or a film festival type of film, but it really felt like it. I don't know about you, but like watching it through, it didn't feel like a big budget franchise, lots of support type of film. And I enjoy watching those in theaters. They're the kind of films that you go and you sit in a mostly empty theater and just kind of enjoy the art.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the film is like really incredibly well shot and incredibly well lit. Like the lighting, specifically in the nighttime scenes, I thought was really striking. I thought visually it was a really interesting looking movie. Even the production design and the sets were very like natural and very I mean, they were kind of typical for a Western, but there was something different about them. And I found that really striking. Like that's the one thing that really stuck with me for the movie was just the visuals of it. But
see, that's actually interesting to me because just for the viewer's knowledge, we have not actually spoken about this movie at all to each other since watching it. So this is our first conversation about it. So we may have some conflicting opinions. And not to say that I would conflict with that, but I was going to say one of my first things that I noticed about the movie was that it felt, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it felt very, very low budget visually. I was actually
I think the budget was like 35 million or something like that. So it's pretty low budget for that type of movie. It's average.
Yeah. And not to say that it felt like it wasn't bad. Like none of the visuals were particularly awful or anything, but I did get a sense sometimes with some of the cinematography, I just wasn't really blown away by, as well as there were a couple of scenes where it was like they clearly didn't do much CGI for the film. And I like that. But when they did do it, it was like they didn't have the big budget team of CGI people doing it. So it looked really cheap and it really took away from a couple scenes for me. And that's something that I'll look past, especially in a film like that. But there was like a scene where they were the chase on the carriage where it's Tom Hanks and the little girl are they're running from these like bandit types of guys that are trying to kill them. And it was looking pretty good. And then there's like one scene where it was just totally everything on the screen looked CGI and like cartoonishly CGI'd.
There were like 3 or 4 moments of very clear CGI that looked really bad.
Like the boulder falling was the next one that I saw. And so I don't say that to like knock it because I mean, like I said, I totally get it, but that was something that I noticed and it made the film feel a little bit more low budget. But before we get too far into it, I will give a spoiler warning, I guess, because we may go over, I mean, we're just chatting about the film. So just in case we trod over any major spoilers for the film, you've been warned here. And for anyone that is just tuning in and curious about whether or not to get into the movie or try it, or you just haven't heard of the movie, don't know what it's about, because quite frankly, I didn't know much about it until it was about to come out. It's a Tom Hanks led film. It's kind of a Western. It's called News of the World. Tom Hanks plays a character that is traveling around. What era was this set in? This was after Civil War?
Late 1800s, I want to say.
After the Civil War?
Yeah.
And it was like shortly after, though, because
probably like 1870s, 1880s.
Yeah, there's still a lot of political, and I'm going to be the first to say, like, if I get any of this wrong, like, don't sue me. But like, there wasn't a lot of politics to it, but there were a lot of like little nods and references to, I guess, what was going on the political landscape, because he's Tom Hanks's character is out essentially delivering the news by word of mouth. From town to town about what's going on across the world. And there are a lot of references to what's going on in the time politically, where it seems like, the war is over, but a lot of people are still disgruntled about what's going on between the South and the Northeast and whatnot. So he's going around giving the news out, and he comes across a girl who is was she German?
I think she was German.
They said she's like a German girl, but she had been living with Native Americans, like a Native American tribe, right?
I think her family was killed by Native Americans.
Yeah, they were killed, but she
lived with them.
Kind of adopted by them and lived with them, and clearly grew to love them. But she's been stolen away, and she was being taken back to, I guess, the Americans. And Tom Hanks comes across her because the person that was taking her back was killed, and she's just kind of, blah, blah, blah. Not particularly interesting details, but basically it starts this journey where Tom Hanks is trying to get this kind of uncivilized girl who doesn't speak English, who doesn't really listen, wants to run away. She wants to go back and live with her Native American tribe pretty much at this point. She seems like she's been adopted, and she wants to go back and live with them. And it's basically just a journey type of film where he's taking her back to what he believes is her German family. And that's kind of just the premise of the film. We'll try not to get into too many spoilers until we'll go from the beginning of the movie to the end in regards to analysis and broad takes. And but there will be spoilers as we go. So if you get to a point where we've kind of wrapped up our general opinions on the movie, then we'll go into like the really spoilery elements of it. But that being said, we already talked about kind of the production of the film. I did think it looked good otherwise, but it did strike me as like kind of a film festival indie film to an extent. And maybe that's just because that's the way that budgets go these days and the way movies are. Anything that's not a franchise, like superhero film, just looks more like...
Well, it's also, it's directed by Paul Greengrass, who is mostly known for The Bourne Supremacy and The Bourne Ultimatum. And but he also did Green Zone and Captain Phillips and...
That's another Tom Hanks movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the last Jason Bourne movie. But he has his style of movie making is almost documentary style. Like the way that he shoots his movies is very tight and close and shaky.
Yeah.
This movie was a lot less so.
I was going to say this didn't remind me at all of any
which
of the Bourne
I liked
movies.
Because I'm not a huge fan of the like tight, close, shaky style of it.
Yeah, I agree.
But he always has those like documentary type zooms and it's very like I want to say he has a background in documentaries. I might be wrong about that.
Talked about that before.
But anyway, that's very much his style, and it was very toned down for this movie, and I liked that.
Yeah, I liked the fact that it was all kind of toned down because we had talked about it. He's not a director that I'm super familiar with or, have studied. But I mean, I've seen most of those films and I enjoy most of those films. And even though I like the Bourne movies, I would say that if there was anything that I didn't like, it was that directorial style. I think it really did work for the Bourne movies, but it's not something that I'd be like, I want to go see every movie that this guy makes type of thing. That being said, it does seem toned down in this film. So I guess that would be a pro. That being said, I don't think I do think it takes away a little bit of the unique directorial style. It's like, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Well, it was very clear, especially from the first half of the movie, that the approach and the intention of the movie was to make a very classical style Western. Like it's very reminiscent of like 50s style Westerns, specifically in story. It's based on a novel and it has a very novelistic feel in the way that it traverses the story. Because most of it is, I mean, it's essentially a road trip movie.
Yeah.
For the majority of it. And for me, it got so much better as it went on. Like the second half of the movie, I was really into. The first half, I felt like it could have been trimmed up a bit.
I would agree with that.
There really wasn't, they didn't give us enough of Tom Hanks's character to be into it yet. Whereas the second half, to me, like it was the relationship between the kid and Tom Hanks that sold it, and then we started to learn more about Tom Hanks, and by the end of it I got his character and it made the first half much better to me.
Yeah, see, for me, I have a very similar opinion, but I think it's a little bit stronger in that the movie was almost losing me in the first half. I was into it because I'm here at the theater and I'm excited to be here and I want to watch a movie and I'm trusting, this director and these actors to deliver something decent. So I wasn't going in like skeptical, but through the first half of the movie, I was kind of like, it started off very slowly, and slowly as in, the opening shot of the film and the first few scenes were very like meh, so, not really anything that I personally found to be remotely stimulating. And I was like accepting of that because I'm like, this is the kind of movie that we're in for. It doesn't have to be exciting. It doesn't have to be that dynamic, but I found none of the dialogue, none of the conversations, none of the scenes, especially in the opening, but even as it went through the first like half, none of them were particularly dynamic. There weren't a lot of, with it being a road trip movie, there were not a lot of characters. Mm-hmm. There are characters that come and go, but none of them were memorable and none of them were really creating dynamic scenes with Tom Hanks. It was like all the dynamics were on Tom Hanks and the young girl who he's traveling with. And while I do think that was strong, I don't think it was strong enough to really hold up the first half of the movie. Yeah. And it did get better as it went. But once it did start getting better, I had to question, I was like, is it too late? Like, how invested am I here?
I really liked the ending. Like the last 15 to 20 minutes.
Yes,
I thought were really strong.
Without going into like the spoilers.
Yeah, without touching on that yet, like the very, very end with Tom Hanks, his character, I really liked that bit. And I thought Tom Hanks did a really good job there. That it retroactively made the rest of the movie better for me.
Well, that's a question that I have, though, regarding Tom Hanks's character and Tom Hanks as an actor a little bit. And I feel like you probably won't agree with me. So that's kind of why I want to pose this. And this isn't a disrespect to Tom Hanks or his acting, but as someone who grew up kind of seeing Tom Hanks as this just iconic, like, I mean, I would have, maybe this was just my perception, but growing up, I put Tom Hanks in like the DiCaprio, Depp echelon of just, and even, what's his name? There Will Be Blood.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis. I've always, 3 names. You don't need 3 names. Like, I'm so bad with names lately. I'll just, people that I absolutely used, like I know, talk about and love all the time, I'll be like, what was that name? But, like I would put him in the upper echelon of, not like as in big actors that make the money, but just big actors that are truly like craft actors. They understand their craft and they use it to the highest potential. They have done a big variety of things, you know. And, you know, some of those actors like DiCaprio or Depp especially like have fallen since then. But in terms of the height of the like early 2000s in my childhood, he was an actor that was up there. And I feel like in his past, and I haven't seen every one of his past movies, so I may be speaking from a level of ignorance. And I know that some of his bigger movies like The Post and some of those films, like obviously he did a good job. And he does a good job in all of his films. But I do feel a bit like as he's gone on the past like maybe 5 to 8 years, I feel like he's starting to phone his performances in just a little bit, and that it doesn't feel like he ever really steps out of his comfort zone very much anymore, which he doesn't have to.
Yeah,
but I feel like he's relying on being Tom Hanks now, not like, whereas in his earlier movies, I felt like he was like really trudging forward to break new ground for his career.
I disagree with you on him being in the like echelon of Daniel Day-Lewis and DiCaprio. To me,
I would not say that he is like, I would never put him above them.
Right.
I would definitely put him below. I just mean like in terms of names that make you go like, oh, that's a true. Well,
I would say Tom Hanks is a movie star. Like, I think he's a really great actor, and there's plenty of evidence of that. But I would classify him as a movie star, whereas I would classify somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis as like, he's the type of person where you see his movies and you forget that he's in the movie. Whereas Tom Hanks is the type of person that you go see and you see Tom Hanks, and he's Tom Hanks, and he's Tom Hanks, the movie star.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
And it's the same thing with like Harrison Ford. Nobody goes to a Harrison Ford movie and goes like, wow, Harrison Ford really disappeared into that character. Yeah. People are like, I like Harrison Ford, and that's why I like him in that movie. And I feel like Tom Hanks in his early days did a lot of variety in his roles. Like, he started off as a comedic actor, stuff like Big, and you know, and then he moved to like romantic comedies, and then he really like hit his like dramatic stride with like Saving Private Ryan and Forrest Gump, and
that's, I think, really what I refer to when I say like the early days of like the iconic stuff was like Saving Private Ryan, Forrest Gump, like things where I was like, I just saw him as a child. I was like seeing him in these iconic roles.
Yeah, and lately he's played like he's almost had like an obsession with like stoicism.
I was going to say, would you say understated roles?
He because I've actually seen the majority of his movies over the last like 5 to 6 years, and I've liked most of them. But the difference between his roles in like Bridge of Spies, which is a fantastic movie and he's great in it, and The Post, and Sully, and I'm blanking on Greyhound, Captain Phillips. He's done a lot of playing like real life characters who are very understated, very stoic. And it seems like he's drawn to the movies more for the story than he is for exploring the character too much. Like there's so many similarities between his characters and even the other movie that came out in 2020, Greyhound, which wasn't that great, but he basically played the same role.
Yeah.
And I think he's good at it. But I think it's more that he's doing so much of the same lately that I think that's more why it feels sort of recycled. But I actually think as the movie went on, especially towards the end, this was actually one of his best performances in the last few movies.
Going into, I guess, my interpretation of what he's putting forth is that it feels like, especially early in this movie, News of the World, it feels like he was kind of just phoning things in. I'm like, is this like a stoic minimalist actor type of vibe that he's trying to go for. I can never tell with the people that are trying to do like the minimalist acting. It's like sometimes I'm thinking like, this is really great. Then I'm like, this is really pretentious. Then I'm like, you are not trying very hard right now. Like,
I think it was very fitting.
Very fine lines.
I think it was very fitting for this character. I think the issue was that the story didn't place him with side characters that brought anything out in him until later on.
It's not the type of story that's going to be explosive and dynamic. And I don't mean explosive in like an action film. I mean explosive just in the drama. Like the movie, if it was going on a line, it was very much like this, going up and down lightly. It didn't have a lot of peaks and it didn't have a lot of lows, which is fine. But I think in the story climate that we have these days, especially when it comes to blockbuster films, which this was not, we are as viewers conditioned to expect extremes. And I think that common story advice would lean you towards that, towards leaning into the things that are truly unique and extreme. And while this movie was vaguely unique, it didn't feel like it had a lot it didn't really feel like we were treading any new ground. And not that every film has to, but I have to think about that when giving my critique. I have to think, I was just like, I'm really not seeing a lot unique here or particularly enjoyable. It was solid, but it wasn't anything that would put me over the moon or really like immersed in. And I thought that with a better character or just a character with more vibrance, or not even vibrance, because the character doesn't need to be like happy or have a ton of personality, but there were a lot of instances where it just felt like Tom Hanks was just existing in front of the camera, not really acting or portraying or catching our attention or really directing our attention. So, but I mean, who am I? But Tom Hanks is, like I said, I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, because I just feel like he's later in his career. He's getting old. And I feel like he's at a point where I just have to question if he's like kind of phoning it in, because that's how I felt up until midway through, and specifically the end. And the other thing, the other point that I wanted to touch on before you go, was that when his real redeeming factor is that at the end of the film, it does get fairly emotional. And as he was portraying the emotions of the film, I was like, oh yeah, this is what Tom Hanks is best at. And then I thought back to all his iconic roles, and I was like, he is really good at the drama, at the truly emotion, at crying on screen. Like, he's a great on-screen crier. He's like, I really enjoy him in those roles. But early on in the film, when he's like having to get out and on stage and talk to people, and we're having to watch him interact with these kind of faceless side characters that aren't doing anything. None of the scenes it was like every scene and dialogue session was kind of just exposition. It was just what you needed to get to the next thing. There wasn't really anything lively.
I don't think I don't think almost any of that was Tom Hanks's fault, though, because I think for the character that he was playing, I don't think he really made a mistake in his portrayal of him. I think the issue is that the story took a long time, or the story placed him with side character, or the side characters that did pop up in the story, which were few and far between, didn't bring out any of his character's unique aspects. Yeah. And it really didn't do that until towards the end of the movie. I think when it did that at the end of the movie, he did really well. But until then, it's so understated, which is like, that's contextually very well played for him, but it's the story's fault for not placing him with characters that brought any of that out.
That's a critique that I have for the entire movie, is that there was very little life in the movie in any of the characters. I mean, I would say the little girl that travels with him is the most lively character, and I didn't particularly enjoy her very much. I started to enjoy her as the film went on, but early on in the film, she was really just kind of grating on me, because she plays a character that's angry and annoying and doesn't listen, and that's fine. She did a really great job, I thought, as a young actress. But that being said, I think that Tom Hanks's character and the characters surrounding him, they felt very like half finished almost. And while they gave Tom Hanks some more to work with as the film went on, I felt like even just down to the mannerisms and the story and the building of what we had to watch, the building of what we had to watch seemed very much unfinished, or like there was just a lot further to go and they just didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. There was sort of switch over after the shootout, like chase scene, which I thought was very well done.
Yeah,
I thought it was really tense, and
yeah,
I thought
especially for a young, like, Western.
I thought they made
stunts.
the most of the environment too, to make it interesting, and they did a good job of making sure you knew where everybody was at geographically. It was a well done set piece.
Yeah,
and after that, it was like a slow climb in quality for me, or more investment. It was like a slow, okay, I'm more invested in this, I'm more interested in this. I thought when they come up on I don't think it's too big of a spoiler, but when they come up on the town that's like sort of blocking people out, and the guy tries to make him read news just from the town, and he, like, turns all town people against him, and then there's a mild action scene there. I thought that scene was like really well shot and really well lit.
Yeah.
And the sound was
yeah,
really
I
good
thought that
too.
everything after, there's kind of a set piece at the midpoint, or it's almost the midpoint of the film.
Yeah.
Everything after steps up quite a lot as it goes. But yeah, I just felt like, I was wondering, that was really my big takeaway from the movie. I was just kind of wondering, I was like, I wouldn't put any of my problems with the film on Tom Hanks, but I was thinking to myself, like, is he really giving it his all? Does he have much to work with here? And then by the end of the film, I was like, God, Tom Hanks is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I thought that it was an enjoyable return to the theaters. I wouldn't say like I loved it. I thought it was vaguely enjoyable, entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it never quite works as well as it should. But I think there's something admirable about trying to make a very classic style Western in today's
it was
film
like
climate. And there was something refreshing about just seeing that type of movie, those type of themes, that, era explored. And also from a slightly different angle, with his character not being like a bounty hunter, or a cowboy or something, but him being a really regular,
a newsman
person. Yeah.
I thought it was a vaguely unique concept, and it's the type of movie you want to support. I guess, like, or at least I do, in regards to the types of films that we enjoy and want to see more of. I always want to support films like that, even if they don't always live up, or they aren't amazing or Oscar-worthy performances. I always want to give them a shot and support them, specifically because we don't want them to stop being made. Mm-hmm. Because in a world that's getting overrun with blockbuster superhero films and the like, I think it's really important to spotlight those films, which is kind of why we're taking the time to talk about it on the podcast. So, I mean, I would definitely, I guess, like, to anyone listening and wondering about the film, I would encourage people to see it.
Yeah. Especially if you like Westerns, I'd say it's worth.
It's enjoyable, and people who like Westerns enjoy Westerns because they're Westerns too.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's the type of thing where you're gonna like just kind of existing.
But in terms of modern Westerns, it's definitely not anywhere near as good as something like True Grit.
It's not going on any lists.
Right.
But yeah, I was generally happy with it, happy with the experience, and I really appreciated it more, to bring it full circle, after I watched Wonder Woman the same night. We went to see it on Saturday, mm-hmm. and I watched Wonder Woman on Saturday night, and I was like, what am I doing with my life?
There's something nice about a movie that was put together competently.
Just makes, at least, there's something to not biting off more than you can
has
chew.
Slightly more pure intentions than
there's something to not biting off more than you can chew. And or at least doing things in a film that remotely make sense, having plots that, like, I always enjoy whenever I'm writing something or encouraging someone else to write something, people get overwhelmed with what to do, all the things you can do, and it's like, choose a few things and do them well, is always what I think of as like that's like my immediate advice, or the pillars of writing. And I think a movie like News of the World is a great example of that. They kept it contained and small, and while they didn't knock it out of the park, they did it well enough so that there wasn't a ton to like critique. It was like, all the critiques are that it didn't jump into the upper echelon. It wasn't that it fell low in any places. So Wonder Woman, on the other hand, cricket noises. Thank you and good night. But no. So heading into 2021, hopefully we will have a lot more excitement in regards to movie theaters and films coming out, assuming that nothing else gets pushed back. At this point, I expect to not have to have like less than 3 films come out in 2021 at this point. They're pumping them out on Netflix, HBO. Stuff's coming out left and right on these streaming services, and I am not.
One of the things that bothers me
in the loop
the most about movies coming out on streaming services is that there's no big release around them. Like
the press is really hard to follow sometimes. Maybe that's just
I don't
me.
know when movies are coming out.
But as someone who doesn't want to spend all my time on social media, like
like the new Cartoon Saloon animated movie, they did Song of the Sea. They're the Irish studio. They came out with a movie called Wolfwalkers.
They came out with a movie?
Mm-hmm. Apple TV exclusive.
Oh.
And I knew it was coming out because I follow them on Instagram, and I heard that it was coming out, and I was excited for it. And I didn't even realize it was actually out.
Okay.
But I watched it last week. It was great.
Okay, well, there's your problem. When it comes to these streaming services, I will accept and watch your movie if you sell it to Netflix. I will do that if you sell it to HBO. Amazon Prime. I'll even hook up the old Hulu, which gets watched like once a year. Yet I somehow still have a subscription to. But do not sell your movie to Apple what? What is it called?
Apple TV. It's literally
Plus,
just
Apple TV
if you just have an Apple
TV Prime.
Like if you just have if you literally just have an Apple account, you have access.
I say that as a general Apple supporter. I have Apple products. Apple TV is not on the list of subscription services that anyone is getting. That's why the films.
It's because if you have an Apple account, you have it, but you don't have to like pay extra for it.
So it's just.
I literally just downloaded the Apple TV app on my PlayStation, logged in with my Apple account, and I watched it.
Okay.
So it's like you have access to it as long as you have an Apple account.
That makes me question the marketing of everything.
But still, the fact that if you didn't have an Apple account or an Apple product or whatever, you're restricted in what movies that you can watch. Or if you don't feel like paying for Hulu, you can't see, whatever Hulu exclusive comes out is absurd to me.
Yeah.
Like that's the nice thing about the theaters is that like as long as you can afford a ticket, you can go see a movie.
I would just like to know. Like if I need to go pick up if there's a movie that I really want to see, if I need to go get a 7-day free trial of a different service or even pay for 1 month of that service, I'm not totally opposed to that. I know that that's going to vary based on how much people care on what they're willing to do to see the movies. But for me, it's about the marketing. It's about like, how am I getting the news of these films? Because like there are movies that are coming out and I'm not hearing about them till they're in the trending on Netflix and so it's like, at some point, like, and maybe this is just me, like maybe this is just us acting like old farts, but olding like old farts. Is that what I said? Dude, I'm getting twisted up in my words. I say too many words a day, dude. But maybe this is like an old fart take, but I like to get my movie news or movie trailers at the theater.
Yeah.
I like
the other
to see
issue
it
is
at the
that
theater.
if you turn on an HBO movie, it might play ads at the beginning of it,
and I'll probably not watch them at all.
But for other HBO movies, they're never going to advertise a Netflix movie. They're never going to advertise an Apple TV movie. You don't get the like broad. When you go see a movie, you get like most of the new trailers.
There are not many big movies that are going to come out when I go to sit down at the theater that I won't see a trailer for over the year. If I'm going to see even just a few films a year, you're going to see trailers for most of the big releases.
Yeah.
And like I've had movies all through 2020 that I heard about when they came out. And like I said, maybe that's on me. Maybe I just need to like dig more, subscribe to some like niche loser magazines or something. But it's hard. It's just hard to keep up
releases.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up
but
with.
Still,
I check the Netflix new releases.
I don't know once or twice. What's a
week.
True new release though? Like what legitimately just came out.
Well, also you don't know when you're looking through like a Netflix, for example, but this goes for any of the services. When you're looking through like a new releases tab, it's not the same because you're not getting the trailer, you're not getting the reviews, you're not getting the buzz around it. I just see names of films, and if I'm just going off the name and the film's cover art, it's rare that I just pick a movie based on that. Mm-hmm. I usually take movies based off of recommendations.
I mean, up until like normally I avoided Netflix movies. Like I
Yeah.
didn't view them as like movies essentially. Like they went straight to Netflix. I was like, well, why? Like the only Netflix movie until COVID destroyed theaters that I watched was The Irishman. That was the only one.
That's funny.
Never watched a single other one.
Yeah. Well, I just get most of my new movie news from recommendations, reviews, general buzz around the movie, whether it's, whatever the actor, if I see it's an actor that I really enjoy, director, things like that. Just looking at the title of a film and hopefully getting a picture of maybe an actor that I like being all that entices me to a film when I'm flipping through a streaming service is just, I don't think it's a particularly good way to market films. I don't know, but then again, maybe it works. Maybe it gets a lot of views. Maybe there are other avenues that I'm just not seeing. But I think not having the buzz and that type of ability changes things a little bit. But everything is changing. Everything's changing and shifting right now. And the fact that I've been locked out of my Twitter account for the past month and a half means I don't get a lot of.
Why have you been locked out of
Twitter? PSA to Twitter. Twitter is full of crap. They're garbage, and for the second time in 2 years, they've kicked me out of my account for suspicious activity. I cleared my cookies on my computer trying to fix another problem, and it took out my password because I had everything just auto linked into my desktop. And when I tried to log back in, it was like, suspicious account activity. You need to verify your identity. And my identity on Twitter, my Twitter account, even though I've updated the email to my current email, is my email from when I was 11. And I can't get into that email because I don't know the security password. So long story short, they refuse. I've been trying to talk to people. Twitter has nothing but bots operating their company, and they just absolutely refuse to even speak with me or try to help me, because even if I can give them all the information that they need, because I'm not trying to communicate with them through my email that was put in when I was 11 years old, because I'm not using that email, they just say, we can't verify your identity and you can't get out. Just make a new account or something. And I'm like, it is a nightmare. It's a massive frustration. But on the flip side, it means that I don't have Twitter anymore, which makes my life it's made my life a lot better. But on the flip side, in regards to films, it does make it like, I don't see, I've always used Twitter to follow a lot of news, but specifically entertainment news. I see new video games, new books, authors, directors, actors, and
I'm on Letterboxd, which is like the best. It's essentially like movie social media
stuff, though. Letterboxd,
yeah, but it's
who has a Letterboxd app?
Tons of people. It's super popular.
Nerds.
No, but it's great for seeing reactions to new movies, or just new movies, or logging new movies. Or,
yeah, if you only care about what nerds have to say.
Yeah, I do.
No, that's a good idea. It's just not something I would ever.
You have a podcast where you talk about nerdy stuff all day long.
Stop. What are you talking about? This YouTube channel is for cool, jacked bros. Okay, it's for dudes who do a lot. They can bench really high numbers of pounds. Okay,
and you know that because they wear Adidas shirts.
Exactly. I'm going to my demographic, right? But anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you care about supporting, I guess I would say like less blockbuster franchise films, go check out News of the World, and more specifically supporting theaters, because I think that's going to be incredibly important going into 2021.
Made an amazing $7.5 million.
Oh, we didn't talk about that.
$38 million budget.
$7 million. That's all it made. I mean, I'm not going to say.
Also, it's a Universal movie, and it went to video on demand. It's going to video on demand after it's hit its 17 days in theaters. So
interesting.
I'm sure that's where 90% of people have seen it, if they see it.
And I'm not going to lie, I kind of expected something around that, especially for a film that didn't have a lot of hype going into it. But that being said, you should go check it out, because I do think that going into 2021, I know it's like you're not doing much and no one has a lot of money right now. But if you do care about the art of film, I honestly don't know that there's anything we can do, but those few dollars to go to the theater and check out a movie are about the only way you can vote with your money. Yeah. So that being said, we will see you guys next week with another episode. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or whatever your podcast provider is. Leave us a 5-star review. Comment below your opinion of the podcast, as well as your opinions of the movies or whatever creative entities that we discuss. We love the conversation. And otherwise, we will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.